Hello and welcome to our weekly look at events inside Syria. I'm Taimur Nabili. Now, the UN observer mission to Syria was suspended on Saturday. The mission chief, Major General Robert Mood, announced the decision, citing increasing violence against the observer teams. And it came as members of Syria's opposition groups were concluding their latest meeting in Turkey. But 2 days of discussions in Istanbul failed to yield a statement or indeed any sense of unity. And all the while, inside Syria, civilians continue to pay a heavy price. Jane Araf reports.
Too dangerous for the UN to continue. The general in charge said recent fighting had made it impossible for observers.
In this high-risk situation, UNSMIS is suspending its operations. UN observers will not be conducting patrols and will stay in their locations until further notice. Engagement with the parties will be restricted. This suspension will be reviewed on a daily basis.
The team of unarmed observers has been unable to enter areas under attack. In other places, they've been turned back by angry crowds. The mission was set up by the Security Council to monitor a peace plan. Instead, it found itself reporting on the aftermath of what many believe have been massacres. Civilians caught in the middle of what has become a more effective armed opposition, and government forces intent on beating them back.
The situation is appalling, and it's appallingly complicated. It was possible until fairly recently to believe that it was a simple case of a tyrannical government being resisted by protesters. That's no longer possible. It's no longer possible to see it in those terms.
Over the past 10 days, according to the UN, fighting has intensified, including in the flashpoint of Homs. Here, government troops have shelled the city, trying to dislodge opposition fighters. The UN Security Council is expected to meet to decide the next step. But with deep divisions over how to end the fighting, it seems likely to continue. Jane Araf, Al Jazeera, for Inside Syria.
So will the withdrawal of UN monitors make any difference in Syria? And will it be a negative or a positive for the anti-Assad opposition? To talk about these issues, I'm joined in Manchester by Osama Monajed. He's a member of the Syrian National Council and an executive director of the London-based Strategic Research and Communication Centre. In Detroit, Michigan, Sherkoh Abbas is Secretary General of the Syria Democracy Council. And in New York, Richard Murphy was a former U.S. ambassador to Syria and a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern and South Asian Affairs. Gentlemen, thank you all for being with us today to talk about this issue. Mr. Murphy, I will begin with you, if I may, with the issue of the UN and their monitors in the country. Where does this leave the so-called international community, I suppose, and its next move?
Well, the monitors came in under a 90-day mandate, which has to be reviewed, renewed, or cancelled in July. So there are only a few weeks remaining in their mandate. This is a setback to the monitors, but let's remember their mission in connection with the ceasefire was to verify, to report, verify, observe. They have disappointed those who thought their mission should be much more active, intervening, but there are only less than 300 of them in the whole of Syria today, and they're not armed troops sent by the world to close down the active violence in Syria.
Sure, but have they achieved anything? And if so, what will their departure mean?
Initially, I think they did achieve something. They got the message across to both the regime and to the opposition that the world was watching. But then neither side was ready for a ceasefire. Now, if they should be withdrawn, it would be a very strong signal that there is real chaos ahead, and that there's nothing that the United Nations team can do on the ground.
Sherkoh Abbas, your thoughts?
I do believe with the ambassador that it did achieve in terms of bringing the message that there is a problem in Syria and there's a humanitarian issues. However, it failed to do anything in terms of really bringing international support for the Syrian people, because today we see the Syrian people being slaughtered by the regime, and there's no serious effort by the international community. Sorry to say this, in this case, U.S. Is slipping in international leadership. They haven't done enough to really support the Syrian people, and more than 15,000 people being slaughtered. And the UN today, Obama administration trying to go through the UN, and this is the wrong vehicle. I think UN Secretary General, basically.
So what you're saying is that it wasn't even the right response in the first place, so they won't really be missed. Osama Monajed, how about you? Do you think that their presence was of any value?
I don't think that the monitoring mission had added any value. The only thing the Syrian National Council, we agreed in the opposition to the terms of the Annan plan, was to expose the Syrian regime in front of its allies, Russia and Iran, because they were supportive also of the Annan plan. And it's very clear since day one that the regime will never uphold or fulfill its commitments to the Annan plans. They will never cease fire. They will never allow Syrians to demonstrate peacefully and protected way. They will never release all political prisoners, and they will never allow international journalists to enter the country and roam freely. So, since the beginning we knew this will never happen. But even the Free Syrian Army, they announced that they will agree to the terms and they will cease fire. Now, it is very unfortunate to hear some people and commentators treating both sides of the conflict equally, treating the oppressor like the oppressed, and saying the regime and the opposition and putting them all both on a kind of a leveled way. There is the picture inside, and what's really happening in reality on the ground is that there is a mafia crony regime, dictatorship that is brutal and willing to go and cross all red lines to kill its own people to maintain their grip on power and maintain the grip on the state and the country. So, and there are civilians who want to defend themselves, and the only violations, yes, there have been violations from the Free Syrian Army side, but only to respond to the attacks on civilians in their areas. You cannot ask people to sit arm folded and waiting to the militias and militiamen of the Assad to come and rape their women, slaughter their children and kill their elderly. There's no way you can ask people to
let me bring it to you, because it's very clear that your two interlocutors here have a very distinct position and a fairly unwavering one. But let's just look at the broader picture, if we might, without some of the gory detail, and just consider the future options here, because for a lot of people now, sitting outside of the country, the Assad regime, one way or another, is doomed. The question really is not about the detail, it's simply about how we get to the end point where he departs. Would you go along with that line?
I would. And the difference in viewpoint today between, for instance, Washington and Moscow is very distinct. If it is doomed, it will only come about through the process of negotiations, as the Russians have put it, not as a precondition to negotiations that President Assad step aside,
and therefore,
that he fall,
if I may
that he be put out, whatever.
If I may interrupt you then, I mean, if that is the situation that we face, that we can assume that he will go at some point and the means of his departure will be diplomacy, then the demands of your interlocutors for greater military intervention, how would you rate those? And how would you also rate Washington's own behavior along with other countries, which is still consistently to make sure that the opposition is able to continue its part in this fight?
I think the opposition within Syria has shown enormous, exceptional courage. I think it's very important that whatever outside assistance is provided not be seen as taking over the campaign to change the regime. that will be the natural instinct of the regime to say, yes, it's what we said all along, it's a world against us and trying to manipulate honest Syrians into doing the work of imperialists, of assassins, etc. So it's very important that whatever intervention comes, it be seen as supportive of the opposition, but not a takeover by the world. Now, that's just how to pull that off is not clear. We'll get perhaps a clearer view on Monday after President Obama and President Putin have had their talks in Mexico.
Well, how it's seen, and indeed who that opposition is obviously going to be one of the questions. And it brings into play what's been going on in Istanbul this weekend, and that is a meeting of the anti-Assad forces. And that very meeting in itself raises a number of questions. Let's just introduce our viewers to some of the parties to that meeting in Istanbul. The Syrian National Council, as it's known, is a coalition of 7 opposition groups. It's a 300-member council formed last September in Istanbul, made up of the exiled Muslim Brotherhood, dissidents, intellectuals living abroad, minorities within Syria, and some revolutionary youth. The Free Syrian Army itself was formally announced on July the 29th. It's mainly made up of defectors from the National Army, but the size of that loosely organized group is unconfirmed. Thoughts are that it's somewhere around a few hundred active along Syria-Turkish border. Then there's the National Coordination Committee, the NCC. That's an internal opposition bloc consisting of 13 left-leaning political parties and independent political activists, including 3 Kurdish political parties and youth activists. The Syrian Patriotic Group is made up of at least 20 former secular and Islamist members of the SNC. The SPG formed at the Friends of Syria gathering, as it was called, in Tunis in February. They were brought together to protest against what it called the SNC's failure to achieve satisfactory results. Let's go back to Osama Monajed. I mean, this grouping of which you are a part has been characterized up until now by its failure to be a group at all. It's characterized by continued war within itself and an inability to actually articulate any kind of a common platform, which was in fact confirmed this weekend in Istanbul, where we didn't even see a final statement or a final press conference of this meeting announcing its new leader and presenting a way forward. So where do we go when the opposition, such as it is, isn't really even able to articulate a position?
Well, it's all about managing the right level of expectations. When you expect the opposition groups who have been deprived from practicing politics for over 5 decades, 50 years in Syria, and then you expect them suddenly to meet from extreme right to extreme left and center and liberals with all different ideologies and backgrounds and ethnic groups, meet in one place and agree on one agenda and one platform and one mechanism and one bylaws, then obviously this is not going to happen. It needs a process of maturing, process of learning how to collaborate and cooperate and liaise and build consensus and build alignments and coalitions. And this is very natural. But what is, and at the moment, we all opposition parties agree on the agenda, agree on the objective, at least on the short to mid-term, which is getting rid of Assad and Assad regime and all the mafia cronies and the symbols of dictatorship in the country, from the smallest to the largest, and establishing a democratic, free, secular state. That everyone agrees on this, including the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, hang on. Let me put that to Sherkoh Abbas. Does everybody agree on that? Because the word from Istanbul is that the Kurdish faction has come into this meeting demanding some kind of autonomy.
First of all, you introduced me. I'm a president of Kurdistan National Assembly and a member of SDC. But in this case here, to answer to the point where Mr. Osama pointed out that they need time to practice democracy. They're denied 50 years of democracy. I disagree. Most of the people are gathering in Turkey are in exile for more than 30, 40 years, been in the Western countries and Western democratic countries and US and Canada and Europe and elsewhere. So, and many of them are educated professors and so on. A lot of those folks, if they haven't been able to learn democracy in the West, and now we want to take them and lead Syria. In fact, the SNC itself is trying to hijack the Syrian revolution by trying to bring Muslim Brotherhood and repackage it by bringing a few groups in front of it and take over the Syrian real opposition. I really look at it, there's two opposition in Syria. The people who are fighting on the ground and demonstrating peacefully, and the people outside trying to hijack this revolution and being supported by petrodollar from the Gulf and by Turkey. And this is really the biggest issues here, and Muslim Brotherhood, it is leading. The Kurds are not on board, the Christian not on board, the Druze not on board, Assyrian not on board. So there is a big problem here. The SNC does not represent the Syrian people, and we shouldn't really treat SNC that is representative of Syria. We need to look at a new vision for Syria where it's inclusive.
All right, well, you made some sharp accusations against the SNC. Let's allow Osama Monajed to respond to some of that.
No, it's not. It's leaders, for example, Bayanouni and Shakvin, all of them, they have mentioned, for example, why they're willing to fight Israel for Golan, but they're not willing to fight
we don't have time to get into issues. Let me just ask Osama to respond to this idea that the SNC is hijacking this revolution.
Yeah, I mean, just a very quick response to Mr. Sherkoh Abbas. Mr. Abbas is a Kurdish Syrian, and the president of the Syrian National Council is Kurdish, Dr. Abdelmasih Saida, and it just illustrates the colourful and the diverse nature of the SNC, and that there's absolutely no discrimination based on ethnic
but that's not his point. His point was that this coalition of people that you brought together actually are not representative and actually not particularly effective.
It's very clear when you have hundreds of demonstrations in the country when the SNC was announced, raising the logo of SNC and saying SNC represents me. The chanting was all over the country. You still have the YouTube videos to check. It's all evidence that the people have chosen the SNC as representative of their struggle politically. Again, when you say there's a infighting on the ground and there's opposition in exile, if we are able to meet in a moderate level of safety in the country, we would all go there and meet there. But all will be assassinated, all will be killed, and all will be jailed. There's absolutely no way for the SNC to meet in the country. That's point one. And point two, again, what's happening on the ground, activism and activists and all these, all what's happening on the ground, you need political representation.
All right.
And what people have been waiting for so long, since March last year to October last year, when we announced the SNC, is that everyone had a sigh of relief because there's finally a political representation for the revolution in Syria.
Well, all right, let's come to Mr. Murphy on this. First, two elements there. First of all, is there finally political representation? Because, as I say, all the signs seem to point to anything but a unified political representation. And secondarily, there's also, you don't have to be much of a cynic to look at the past year's events around the SNC and the Friends of Syria and the activities of Washington, Whitehall and some of the other countries in the background trying to create that sort of unity and wonder about who is in fact in charge of this process.
Well, my view is that it's not at all surprising that the SNC has found it difficult to come up with a unified platform. Certainly not having been given the chance over these decades to practice political organization, to express a political themselves in a political force up against the Ba'ath and the domination of the presidency over the Ba'ath. It's not surprising that they're having trouble and are competing for who has the loudest voice and the clearest view of the future. But they have got to get together to be taken seriously by the international community. It's not enough to be united just on the goal of ridding the country of the president. The question is, have they done that? Because Mr. Monajed seems to suggest that they are providing political leadership, and the evidence seems to suggest otherwise. I think they've not reached the point of harmonizing the different views and calming down the frictions within the SNC. And that's a must, as I see it.
And is Washington actually helping the
Well, again,
situation by attempting
very...
to pull together? And it's not just Washington. I mean, Turkey's played a big role in this, so have many other countries. Are they actually helping the situation by attempting to cobble together a coalition out of a bunch of people who appear not to agree with each other?
One day there's going to have to be negotiations between the powers that are within Syria and their critics. And it will be a very disadvantageous position for the opposition if they don't come with a clear platform of demands and a vision for the future of Syria to sell to the people of Syria. And what Washington has tried to do in a limited way through providing communications equipment is to get closer contact between the SNC and the resistance leadership within the country.
Okay, so Sherkoh Abbas,
allow me here to say a few points. I mean, number one, there has been no telecommunication support from Washington to the opposition. And number two, again, how would you expect people from the extreme right to extreme left, like Islamists and extreme secularists, to agree on one political
Well, hold on. Let me allow Sherkoh Abbas a word in this
political platform.
for a second. Mr. Abbas,
okay.
is your objection from the perspective of Kurdish nationalism, or do you just think that overall the process for all parties is flawed?
I think it's both, and that Mr. Minjan just showed to you democracy is basically, it's only his voice and no other voices. The key issues here in Syria. Syria, as the ambassador pointed out, we need to have a discussion, an inclusive way to make sure that all the parties in Syria feel are winner in this equation. We don't have losers and winners. What we see now, Muslim Brotherhood leading SNC with Turkey's support, with U.S. subcontract in its foreign policy via Turkey, all that is not going for the benefit of the Syrian revolution. This SNC need to change its vision and need to be inclusive. Having a Kurdish person on the top doesn't mean anything. For example, there were more qualified people. George Sabra, he's a Christian, even though he is anti-Kurds, but he is, in terms of, because he's Christian, he was not selected. So that tells me it's not a process of democracy. They chose this person. Is they're just window dressing, repackaging the Muslim Brotherhood idea, supported by Turkey and Obama's administration, and this is absolutely, we do not accept.
Right.
What we want, inclusive, all parties in federal system, and we need to have the Kurds, Christian, Alawites, Druze, all of them feel they have a place and that they can go to, that they can basically topple this regime. That's not there.
All
and
right.
Unfortunately, U.S. administration and Turkey are not helping. SNC is a major problem for the Syrian people, just as bad as the regime.
We're very close to the end of the show. Someone wanted to very quickly, because we're out of time. Your argument is that all these different people need time to get to know each other and to come up with a common platform, but you don't have time, do you?
I mean, again, it's about the right level of expectations. At the moment, it is very unfair to say that there is no vision and there is no a transition plan for the SNC, which is not true. It has been presented in the Friends of Syria conference. It's been printed. It's been published on the SNC website. I mean, everyone can go on and check it. Not only the vision and detailing the process of what happens after the collapse of the Assad regime. It details the process of what happens after the collapse of the regime.
There's nothing in there.
It is on the website of the Syrian National Council, and we'll be happy to point it out to you after the show.
Okay, well, we'll allow our viewers to go and check that out. But as I say, this Istanbul meeting...
This is not true.
This Istanbul meeting failed to yield any kind of a press conference afterwards, any sign of semblance, or even any statement at the end to come up with any findings, any conclusions, any agreements amongst the parties at all. Ambassador Murphy, a final word from you as well then. What position does Washington going to find itself in when it next meets on this issue? I mean, obviously the pressure is still on Washington, not only to take the lead, but to take a firm lead in terms of positive action. How likely is that?
Well, there's no question from Washington's support for stronger sanctions, stronger economic sanctions, political sanctions, and support for going for Chapter 7 action under the Security Council. That will be, as of today, if a vote were taken, I assume blocked by Russia and China. Let's see if anything comes out of the meeting in Mexico 2 days from now, any hint that there may be some give in the Russian position.
All right, there, gentlemen, we will have to leave it. We're out of time, but I appreciate your chatting with us today and for your viewpoints. Our guests have been in Manchester, Osama Monajed, in Detroit, Michigan, Sherkoh Abbas, and in New York, Richard Murphy. Thank you for your contributions. And thank you for watching. Those of you who want to catch this show again can do so online. Go to our website, aljazeera.com. But from me for the moment, and from the team here in Doha, it's goodbye for now.